We recorded this episode before the news, so I'm going to forgo my usual snarky introduction and congratulate Dolph Lundgren for beating cancer. Today we're talking about the first movie that I ever saw him in, and that is Universal Soldier. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a sci-fi movie. It's that simple. And today we are doing a recent vote winner over on our Patreon. There was 3 franchises to sort of start off. The other options were the Pitch Black franchise or the Riddick franchise, depending on what you want to call it, and the second era of Godzilla. And to my shock, the patrons voted for Universal Soldier, which is what we're here to discuss today. So
you're not exaggerating about that. As soon as those vote results came in, you were like me on the day after the results in America. I was like, oh my, what did you do, general public?
I mean, I don't think they're that comparable. But yeah,
you were sobbing, you were crying, you were so upset, you were so looking forward to Godzilla.
I have no qualms with checking out Universal Soldier. It's all of the sequels to Universal Soldier that I am less excited about.
You really shouldn't have pitched it as franchise starter, because now we're committed.
But if you do the first one in a franchise, it's always a franchise. I mean, even if we wait 6 months to do the second one, we have to get to it.
True.
So
very true.
We're locked into it now. So here we are. We're doing the 1992 original film, Universal Soldier, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, directed by Roland Emmerich in one of his earlier movies before he went into the disaster porn industry.
Back when he had some restraints. Not a lot, but some.
Yeah, this is hardly a highbrow movie, but when you compare it to what he was doing by the end of the 90s, it actually feels quite refined almost.
Yep.
So, yes, we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler-free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers, and if you are enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch if you do, and you can, of course, get bonus shows over on our Patreon, but I'll tell you more about them at the end of the episode. So, Universal Soldier is a movie that I relatively grew up with this, and even some of the sequels, bizarrely, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. So I had come into this having seen it. I'm going to assume you hadn't seen this.
Nope. Honestly, I didn't even really know what it was about. Based off of the premise and the bare bones I knew, I thought this was a, like, taking place in the future sort of movie. I thought this was, the elite future tech has already set up all these soldiers that are bionically impaired or whatever, but it's modern day for the 90s, and it's total shock to me as to what this ended up being.
So I mean, the basic gist of it is that it's a program where I don't even know. Basically, it's an experiment to sort of bring back soldiers who have died in combat back to life, but have them be basically just mindless drones that are a bit stronger, a bit faster, but just obey commands and can be used as effectively military endorsed Terminators, pretty much. So that's the basic gist of it. But of course, like, we're going to have a story here where the main character, played by Van Damme, is going to start to remember like flashes of his life. So it's kind of one of those like realizing you're being used and kind of regaining your humanity kind of stories. But that's the basic gist of it, but it is very much a 90s action movie as well as a sci-fi movie, and kind of plays out as one. So we'll talk about a lot of that as well. There's definitely a couple of sequences. I mean, I already kind of compared it to Terminator in a way, and I do think there's a valid comparison there, because you've got like a good one, a bad one, one's chasing the other, but also there's some sequences here that I firmly believe that were just straight up put in here because the previous year Terminator 2 was a huge hit, and they all saw it, and that's why there's, for example, a chase in this movie, like a car chase, which is like a big, huge truck, because I'm like, there's a big truck chase in Terminator 2, and I feel like that's why this is here, which is not to critique it, it's just clearly there's some influence going about here.
Yeah, honestly, there's one of the recurring, not a motif, but one of the set design things they have are these little eye pieces with the cameras on the side.
I saw, little like one-eyed visors they're all wearing.
Yeah, I feel like that was only given to make them seem a bit more cybernetic rather than just like a normal ass human.
Yeah, because they look normal otherwise. They're just enhanced, and they're all back from the dead, which is the main sci-fi element of it.
Yeah, but they explicitly say at one point that it's not like technological, it's genetic in a way. Like there isn't they don't have like metal pieces inside of them or anything.
Yeah, it's all mad science as opposed to I suppose bionics is also mad science, but it's all genetic science. So yeah. Well, let's see. How did you feel about Universal Soldier, David?
Not bad. I don't feel like there's a lot more to say on that because
that's fair. I get it.
It's not a movie that really takes big swings. It's not a movie that I think is, trying to. There's a point in this where they start debating like, okay, these were soldiers that were killed and then they're brought back, and they like almost touch on the idea of like, what does it mean to truly be alive? Like, what does it mean to be dead or alive or stuff like that? And I kept waiting for them to take that swing, but the movie knows exactly what it is. And they just kind of are like, don't worry about it. Like, it's not philosophy is not what you're here for. We're just going to stick to the punching and all of the kicking.
It is a B movie, right? It has no interest in actually exploring any science fiction themes. And the ones that it almost stumbles into, it kind of quickly brushes away or just moves on past. It's not interested in doing that. Because there's all sorts of things you could start saying about, like the death just represents like how a soldier comes back differently when they've been off on tour, or they come back a different person or something. Like there's other movies that have done that and used science fiction or horror to show that in some way, but this doesn't want to do that. This just wants to be an action movie more than anything. So
absolutely, I will say that they did, as much as it is Roland Emmerich being restrained, he did a very good job with the stunts and the set pieces. I think that there was very few times where I think an action scene was just kind of lackluster. There is one that we will get to, not in that it's lackluster entirely for what it is in the movie, but it's played much more as a comedy beat than an action scene. And as such, I'm a bit more like, all right, whatever. It's funny, it's there, but I'm also not as engaged.
It's all practical stuff. Maybe it shows you that he might still be making entertaining B movies if CG hadn't taken over in the way that it did. Because then obviously once that happened, all of his movies just became big CG destructions. I mean, Independence Day has a reasonable amount of miniatures and stuff as well as the CG, but once you get to like 2000 and beyond, like his movies are just CG porn at that point, and any charm they might have had once upon a time is gone. Admittedly, when we did Independence Day on the Ace a long time ago, before you were here, obviously, we kind of had this negative kind of tone about it because we kind of felt like as much as we've grown up with this and as much as there's some nostalgia, it kind of is holding up less and less as we get older. And I feel like Universal Soldier, to its credit, has held up exactly the same every time I've seen it. It's not high art, it's not a great movie, but it's a pretty solid B movie with some good leading actors who have got some charisma. Maybe not the best acting abilities in the world, but good presence, good auras about them. I think I especially appreciate Dolph Lundgren in this. That maybe the more I see it as I've grown up as well.
I had such a love-hate thing with him because he is absolutely like overly acting, hamming it up, chewing the scenery, and like objectively he is not being a good actor. But it is just the most fun thing in this movie with how over the top he goes. It's
so compelling. Watching him, I mean, there's a line delivery. It's right near the end of the movie, so I don't really want to spoil it yet. But there's a moment where a gun's empty, and the way he reacts to the gun being empty just cracks me up because it's just the inflection in the line, the way he delivers it just lands. It just hits the spot. Like, you know what? This is why I remember this movie as a kid, because it has these weird little moments like that where he does like a little flourish or something.
I don't even think it's a spoiler because it's in literally the first scene, but Dolph's character has a whole thing with ears, human ears.
Yes.
And as such, he makes a lot of hearing puns throughout this movie.
He does make a lot of hearing puns. Were you surprised when this movie started in Vietnam? Was that
I wasn't, if only I watched it on Paramount Plus and the little bit said Vietnam vets. So I wasn't because of that. Okay. But yeah. Okay. Once I read that, like I said, I was expecting it to be set in the future, so I wasn't expecting Vietnam period. But when it said Vietnam vets, I'm like, well, it makes sense it would start there.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, it's so weird to think about. This was only about 20 years after Vietnam.
Yeah, they make that line somewhere in there of saying, like, oh yeah, it's been 25 years. And I'm like, it's been 35 years since then, where it was then 25 years ago. Oh, God.
And the bit that got me is at one point they work out what age Van Damme's supposed to be. And like, oh, you'd be about 50 now. And I'm like, he's older than that now.
Yep.
He's like pushing 70 now. Holy shit.
Oh, God.
So nah, just a bit of the old timey wimey. It always comes up in these movies that I grew up with, like just the weird timeline of realizing how old, how not old things were at the time, even though they felt ancient, but how not old these things feel. But then you realize it's been way longer since these things happened.
Yeah. The one that it was several years ago now at this point, but the one that got me was when it was less time between A New Hope to Phantom Menace, between Phantom Menace and now.
And that gap just keeps getting bigger.
Right, exactly.
We're going to get to a point where there's a bigger gap between Phantom Menace and, I don't know,
Force Awakens,
and then Force Awakens, and then whatever episode 10 ends up being someday.
Yeah. Oof.
If they ever fart one out. They just announced this past week at the time of recording that their 2026 Star Wars movie's been pulled from the schedule and replaced with Ice Age 6. So all's going well in Star Wars land.
That just sounds like the entire like cinematic community is just going downhill if Ice Age 6 is getting the Star Wars spot.
They have another one coming out, the Mandalorian one, but the other one they had scheduled has been bumped indefinitely.
All right.
So hey.
Well, that means that we could put off watching Attack of the Clones, right? Right?
Do you know what's perfect about this? This is that meme from Attack of the Clones where it's Anakin's face and she says something and then he just stares at her and she's like, right? That's what I was just doing. Right. I was just doing the reaction to that.
Someone cut out our faces and post that meme onto our Discord.
Oh, dear. So, yeah. No. So, I mean, Van Damme's Van Damme, right? He does have presence. Lundgren.
He does have kicks.
He has a lot of kicks. That said, though, there's not a lot of scenes in this where he gets to show off the kicks. It's kind of a treat when you get to it because he goes a long time without it. Lundgren's hamming it up delightfully and doing an okay job at hiding his original accent because they don't even try with Van Damme.
Yeah, it's weird. I think it's mainly just because I know what he's supposed to sound like, that I'm hearing the failures when they leak through.
Sure, no, that's fair. That's fair. And then the other lead of the movie is Ali Walker plays Veronica, who's like a reporter who gets caught up in everything and ends up being kind of the partner to Van Damme throughout the whole thing.
Now, recently we did Cool as Ice.
I know where you're going with this because I looked up what else she's been in and I saw what she was in.
Look, I'm not. IMDb is obviously not perfect when it comes down to the known for section. There are things that they preference movies over TV and stuff like that. I understand it's not perfect, but when your third result of known for is Kazam starring Shaq, I think your career was finished in '96.
I mean, to be fair, she's been doing episodes of TV shows since then. And is still doing it. She was in one in 2024, so she's still a working actor. She's just not a movie star, and that's absolutely fine.
I think she was fine in this. I think she did a great job of basically the Lois Lane character.
That's exactly what she is. She's that feisty, I'm getting the story no matter what character. That's exactly what she is. And yeah, she's solid. I have no complaints. And
yeah.
Actually, there's someone else in here you should have recognized. Did you recognize anyone else?
Jerry Orbach.
Not him. Although I do. I mean, I recognize him too, to be fair, but that's not who I was talking about.
Then no, I did not recognize the other one.
One of the Universal soldiers, like that aren't the main two, is the beefy guy from Gladiator.
Oh yeah.
As soon as he walked on at the start, I'm like, wait a minute, we just saw him in Gladiator.
You're right. That's weird. I don't know why I didn't recognize him. Yeah, I see him now.
Yeah, it's the thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And then one of the other Universal soldiers I recognize too, Tom Lister Jr., the black guy who's in the Unisol program. He is from The Dark Knight.
Is he? Who's he in that?
He's the prisoner during the boat section.
Oh, the one who takes the detonator.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's also in Fifth Element. He's popped up in a bunch of things over the years.
Fair enough. He just didn't get enough screen time. I would have recognized him if he had like a single line of dialogue, because that voice sticks with me.
He doesn't speak. I don't think any other than the main two actually speak at any point. But yeah, so there's a couple of faces just sort of sneaking about in that group. So yeah, okay, there you go. Music's fine. You know, it's pretty typical 90s action movie stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say it just strikes me as that same sort of. It's just you could feel that they just grew out of the synth period that the 80s came out of, and they were still trying to like figure out where they were going with that.
Yeah, there's no like memorable themes or anything like that, but it's perfectly solid. I mean, this is effectively just a solid B movie that's just elevated a little bit here or there with some little flourishes from performance or moments like that. The story again is fine, but it's kind of it really feels like a movie to me that's just a little bit more than the sum of its parts, right?
Yeah, it's strange because if you look at the story, it's not a hyper complex way that it plays out, but on paper it's so high concept. It's this whole thing of like, oh, we're resurrecting veterans from previous wars and we're putting them in this soldier program, but then like by the time you hit Act 2, it's very much just the reluctant hero versus the psychopathic villain. Like that's all it ends up being in the end.
And to be fair as well, like I think you could fairly critique that there's not a lot of depth to the villain here. He's just crazy, and that's pretty much it. There's no, fleshing out of that.
We don't even like see his decline either. We don't see how he gets to crazy. This movie opens and he's already just off the wall.
Yeah, like because the idea is he was crazy when he was alive, and then that craziness just kind of comes back in the same way that Van Damme's character kind of becomes who he was again. And that's pretty much it. There's never really any depth to why he's so obsessed or why he's whatever. He just is, and you just sort of roll with it. But he's entertaining to watch, though, so I mean, they get something right. And I guess in this type of movie, I guess that's as much as you can ask for.
Yeah. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Just in terms of the memory stuff, is kind of RoboCop. That idea of, they assumed that when they went through this program, everything was wiped clean, but then the little more emotional things start leaking in.
So we're saying it's ripping off Terminator and RoboCop.
Yep, absolutely.
And Lois Lane from Superman. That's the combination that we've concocted together. Okay.
And honestly, like it again, spoilers, but there is a lot of Superman parallels when you get down to Jean-Claude Van Damme's backstory as well.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. The farmhouse and stuff. Okay. I can. I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah.
I don't actually think that stuff's intentional, bizarrely. I think the Terminator and RoboCop stuff is probably more directly like, oh, we're taking that and that. I think the Superman stuff is purely by accident.
Yeah, probably.
That'd be my guess anyway. So, all right, I think we could probably just jump into spoilers then. I don't think there's too much more to say. I think it's a fun movie that's not high art, and it's not something... Like, I suspect that a young audience watching it for the first time now probably won't get as much out of it if you aren't into this particular era of the Van Dammes and that kind of thing. But this is one of the better Van Damme movies, so,
Yeah, I'll give it that.
So, yeah. All right, spoilers for Universal Soldier, You Have Been Warned. I always do this. I always start off in something I could have said before spoilers, but I'm going to do it.
You know what? Just embrace it, because this is that little period in between before people can click off.
Yeah, sure. No, this is just something, because I was watching this. I own this on iTunes, and it's in 4K, Dolby Vision, all the trimmings, right? Looks really nice, high quality, pristine. And I had this thought halfway through where I went, none of the sequels are going to look this good. I'll be lucky if they're in HD.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure 2 and 3 are going to be in 4:3 standard definition. So,
well, I think 2. We were looking into the series just when we were setting up. I think 2 did get the theatrical release, didn't it?
No, you're thinking of 4. 2 and 3 came first.
Really? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. That said, though, when I was looking them up before, I was reminded that Gary Busey's in 2, so there's at least something to look forward to.
All right, fair enough. We don't get enough Busey on this show.
No, we do not. We have to do a Busey season over in Collector's Cut.
Oh, God. That's going to be the most haphazard season of, high quality to absolute trash.
The problem is that most of the things that I think of first with Busey is him supporting in something else that, he's in Predator 2, he's in Under Siege. But I wouldn't put Under Siege in a Busey season because I'd save that for
his own thing.
Yeah. So, it's whatever. Anyway, so yeah, the movie starts in Vietnam. And it's basically just this thing where Dolph Lundgren's character has lost his mind, even though they're starting to pull out. It seems like he's even killed some of his own men, because there's like a soldier who like runs out, and like Van Damme's like, "What happened, soldier? What happened?" And he's like, "They're all dead, every one of them." And this guy
Sarge went crazy.
Yeah, this guy, he's not a very good actor, actually. The way he yells all this is not very convincing.
Yes, I'll give you correct. Like,
I'm not saying I don't enjoy it, but it's not good in the traditional sense.
I think he does fine at playing panicked. It's just the issue of like, he's giving too much just from a script writing standpoint, he's giving too much clear, detailed backstory when he should be freaking out. Like, he shouldn't be able to get all of this stuff across, and that's hard to do as an actor as well.
So yeah, anyway, Van Damme goes in to investigate, and Lundgren's basically the only one left alive, and there's this like dead village of like innocent people plus whoever soldiers are there. But it all boils down to he's got this young Vietnamese couple, sort of with their hands tied, and he's talking about executing them, and Van Damme comes in and tries to talk him down, saying, "Hey, we've got orders to retreat. The war's over," or some such.
No, I think at that point it's just they said they cleared out the village. There's no hostiles here. It's just let's step out of this particular situation.
Regardless, the point of it is that hey, we've been told to come back. Like, the mission's over. It's time to go home. Right? That's a line that Van Damme definitely says, because he repeats it a lot. I just want to go home. My tour's up. It's time to go home. And then as the couple, the guy starts yelling, he sort of jumps in front of his wife or whatever. Lundgren shoots him in the head, and this is where Van Damme sort of realizes, oh no, he's lost the biscuit. I have to intervene here.
I'm going to go ahead and just throw out he lost the biscuit when he turns around and shows off his necklace of human ears. But
that's a fair point. Van Damme's not very observant, though. I don't know if he noticed those yet.
No, that's true.
He's Van Damme's not all eyes.
Is that just going to be all the sequels? Is just focusing on a different sense?
No, I tried to phrase it in a way, because obviously Lundgren's line later on is "I'm all ears," but he says it in this scene, I think, and then he says it again later. He really likes saying "I'm all ears."
He's got his puns. He loves it.
As he holds up his necklace of ears. There.
But yeah, so then as soon as he shoots the male prisoner in the head, that immediately kickstarts Van Damme into like defensive mode. He kicks the gun out of Lundgren's hand and gets the girl out of there as best he can.
Yeah, but there's a whole thing where he gets kicked down and he's like, "Run!" and he's in the rain, so very atmospheric. And Lundgren just lobs a grenade at the woman running away, seemingly killing her. And we actually get, I love how over the top cinematic this is. They continue fighting, of course, but the ending where they kill each other, I love that they both go down in slow motion as they're shooting each other. So you get these proper deaths with their arms in the air, and they're both falling backwards. It's a whole thing, but I think I like how cheesy and cinematic it is. It gets me in the mood. But my favorite thing about the intro to this movie is the fact that in the next day, when sun's up, right, there's people coming in and they're saying, "Oh, let's not report this. Let's just say they're all MIA because this is too much to write up." When it goes to the opening titles, right, I love that they zip up Van Damme in the body bag, and it comes up saying Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then it cuts to Lundgren in the body bag, and they zip him up, and then they cut to his name. I was like, you know what? That is just such a cool idea to like bring their titles up, because it's right at the start. It's like, it's also weird because you're starting off with the two leads dying, which is not something you normally do in a movie. So it's just fun. It's just a fun opening.
Yeah, no, I was a bit concerned at the beginning, because I was like, okay, again, I went into this with different expectations of what I thought the movie was going to be, very quickly dashed. But then once it came to the point of like, okay, they're both dead, clearly they're going to come back in some way. And that's where I was still thinking, like, maybe this is still going to be set in the future. Maybe this is because but it's weird because it's set in modern day 90s, but we have this, what is definitely future tech, It's something that is not, it's sci-fi, like they just make it up, but it's something that seems so wildly ahead of the time that they do nothing to justify how the hell we have this in the 90s,
Yeah, that didn't throw me, because that's just not that weird. Like, there's so many sci-fi movies where it is just present day, but one scientist or one group of people have cracked something that lets the movie happen. And that's just what this is. It's just, it's the normal 1992, but there's just one group of people who have done this experimental thing.
Yeah, I guess
It's like Back to the it's like Back to the
Mm-hmm.
Future, right? It's just 1985, but Doc Brown's built a time machine.
Yeah, no, I'm willing to accept it. I think for me, it kind of felt like they went just a step too far in the fact of like, if they had wanted to make super soldiers, I could have accepted that. If they were like, okay, we've empowered these soldiers and they can be super strong or whatever, and we're specifically using ones that quote unquote died in combat, but like maybe they just went missing or whatever, like they were pulled out of service. But to say that reanimating the dead is within their power and that leads to super soldiers, I just felt like that was a little bit extra for the sake of, they just wanted to have it be a Vietnam vet more than anything else. They wanted to have him with this PTSD at this really messed up time.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't bother me that much. Like, I mean, is it any different to RoboCop? Like, because he's technically, I mean, he's like basically dead when they bring him in. I guess he's got that.
That's the thing.
He's got that blip in the heart monitor.
Right.
That's just enough to give you that suspension of disbelief, I guess.
Yep, exactly. That's the part because that's the other thing is like, okay, so what we cut over this period of time. We have the I don't know, rest of the troops or whatever come into the village. They see everyone's dead along with these two and obviously the necklace of ears, and they're like, we can't explain this to the general. We can't explain this to their like next of kin. What do we say? And they just say, just say they're MIA, don't worry about it. But we never get that bridging scene of showing them being like preserved cryogenically or anything. Like it was
no.
just
we
just
cut,
like, oh, and now they're alive.
Yeah, we cut straight to a plane landing in Nevada. Is it Nevada this dam's in?
It's Arizona.
Arizona, okay.
Yes.
It's the big famous dam. You've seen it in other movies.
Yeah, Hoover Dam.
Hoover Dam, thank you. That's the one. Yeah,
Which I don't know if that's in Arizona, but I know that it's the rest of the movie takes place in Arizona.
No. There's some stuff in Utah. It definitely comes up saying Utah later on for some of the scenes because
does it?
They're traveling
That's
around a lot. So,
it looks like the Hoover Dam is actually Colorado.
Oh Jesus! Okay, it's just
so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the Murphys.
Oh no, sorry, the Colorado River. My bad. It's on the Colorado River between Nevada and Arizona. So there we go.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, they're in the deserty corner of the country. Okay, there's a lot of sand and desert and dirt getting kicked up. Anyway.
Yes.
So basically, we find out there's a hostage situation at the Hoover Dam. The vacuum dam, as Americans should be calling it, since that's what they call a Hoover.
I think it was named after the president, but yes.
Who?
Herbert Hoover, the president.
Herbert Vacuum?
Sure, Pete.
You elected Trump, don't even start on me.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, there's a hostage situation. Basically, the bunch of tourists have been held captive. We don't get a lot of context for it. We don't really need a lot of context for it. It's just as a situation. And this team of Unisols, as they call them for short, the Universal Soldiers, is brought in, and we get kind of this introduction of them working as like a sort of expert unit where there's a whole bit where like the people who don't, the locals, authorities or whoever are like, oh, hey, so you're bringing your team in, like, where have you dropped them off? And they're like, oh, here. And like, that's a mile and a half away. We've got 14 minutes until this deadline. Like, what are you doing? But of course, they can swim that fast. So they actually come out of the water and and they're like climbing up the side of the dam.
Yeah,
and it's all...
They checked the clock and it's been like, they made contact. It's been 2 minutes. What the hell?
What are you feeding these boys? What's happening? So yeah, we see them basically just, be very efficient, kill some bad guys. Yeah. There's a little moment of character that is worth mentioning where Dolph Lundgren does like an extra kick to a face, and like the scientist guy's like, I think he's starting to like this, and like the other guy's like, don't be ridiculous, that's not possible.
Yeah, the whole thing with these guys is they are essentially autonomous, but they do follow orders strictly. Like they will stand around and wait around for orders. So when Dolph does the extra kick to the face, they kind of just brush it off as like, when they said take down the guys, he's still just taking down the guy. But obviously, because we saw the earlier scene, it's like, no, he's a little bit extra brutal, and that's leaking through a tiny bit.
Yeah, that's coming in. So yeah, they get in. They have the guy from Gladiator comes in dressed up as like a maintenance worker and like takes a bunch of shots to the chest from the bad guys. But that lets the other two jump out and shoot the rest of the terrorists. So
yeah, and he also is fine. Like the thing about the reanimation process is like he gets shot tons of times and then he just sits back up, takes out a pistol, and shoots the terrorist.
Well, we see it later on with Luke, the main character. That's his name, Luke Devereaux. his like bullet wound later heals when he gets cooled down. So part of like their whatever they've done to their bodies, like they overheat and they have to cool down. But part of what happens when they cool down is that it also just straight up Wolverines their wounds, where they just close up. So I mean, they've established it. So I'll roll with it. But of course, here there's a moment though where two of the hostages happen to be an Asian couple, and they're scared, and they're all handcuffed behind their backs, right? Because they were hostages. And Luke's looking down at them, and he starts like having like a PTSD like flashback of like, wait a minute. And then he has this big dramatic moment where he turns around and looks at Dolph Lundgren, who's just standing there like a robot, and just like and over the comms, like the general's like, report in 44, report in now. Why are you not reporting in?
I mean, Luke doesn't do anything at this point, but you just see him like freaking out. He's just like, oh God, it's you. We're all back here. This is the moment again.
Yeah, he's having all these things. Because we should probably explain that they're traveling around in this big-ass truck that is super high-tech. It does this thing where it kind of expands out sideways to give them more room when it stops.
Yeah. It's like an RV sort of situation.
Yeah, but more high-tech than that, though, because it actually, like, fattens out. And then, like, inside it, they've got this, like, cooling chamber where all the Unisols all sit in their underwear, getting injections, and they go to sleep in there and whatnot.
Yeah, that's the one thing I didn't think that they explained enough. I mean, it just works for what it is, but the injections that they get, they say are like memory things. Like they take away the memories and whatnot. And they just kind of say, oh yeah, they just need to get these injections. But they never say, is this to like mitigate their previous lives' memories? Is this like they're wiping their memory after each mission? Like what are the injections actually for in this situation?
Previous life, I mean, we also know that they get injections of stuff that make them faster and stronger, so I assume they're also giving them that every once in a while too.
Right.
But yeah, because they're concerned about Luke not responding, but they just kind of like, oh, he just got confused. Because the scientist who's like more of the quote unquote a good guy is like, hey, we should take him off the program until we figure out what happened. And the military guy is like, don't be ridiculous. He stays in the program. He just got confused. That's all.
Because every good movie starts with a scientist being ignored and the military guy getting his way.
Quite right, yes. So, yeah, doom is upon us.
Yep. Meanwhile, as all this is going on, while the terrorist attack is happening, we get to see the press coming in and doing their reports, and that's where we get introduced to... her character's name is Veronica. I'm like pretty sure she's only called that in like third person by news programs later on. I don't think any two characters ever said her name to her. No,
they did, but they shortened it to Ronnie. That was like her nickname.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
But yeah, she's like super late for her like on-screen, bit to camera for the news channel, and she just puts on her blazer at the last second. But apparently she gets fired immediately because she's always this unreliable. So she's told to pack her bag and get lost.
She literally tries to use her leverage as the Lois Lane character. She's like, how many stories have I broke for you? I've been doing great, and I'm always on time. I always manage to make it. And the guy's just like, yeah, but like, do you understand how much stress you put me through? It's not worth it. You're fired.
And then her goal at this point then is to like get a story, right? Something that'll like basically make her like indispensable to, if not her old job, then any place where she could go and be a reporter. So she grabs her Jimmy Olsen and is like, hey, we're going to look into this team of like super soldiers that saved the day here. So they go off to spy.
The general specifically shuts it down, saying like, no one's allowed to see them. You're never allowed to know their identity. They have families, and this is 100% under wraps. So everyone just wants a shot of them for the news.
Yeah, which is a lie because they're all dead, obviously.
Right, yeah.
In fact, we find out later, I'll just mention this now, that it comes up that this isn't like something that the government know about. Like, he's clearly lying to whoever's like funding this thing. This is like I don't know, they never really got into the details of it, but clearly the fact that they've reanimated dead soldiers to use them this way is something that they would all go to prison for if they're ever caught actually doing it.
Yeah, it feels like they went in front of Congress to get funding, and they were just like, we're doing a super soldier program. And then the moment they got the money, they're like, okay, but like, we know how to reanimate the dead, so let's go full on Pet Cemetery with this. Which,
on some level, using
seems
people
better.
Who have already died rather than risking real people's lives is arguably a better choice if you can do it.
Look, I get, based off what the movie presents us, yes, absolutely. But if you're telling me, if you just present me with the headline of "Government makes army of zombies," I'm gonna have problems.
Admittedly, yes, the optics of that don't sound particularly great, but I'm just saying, like, dead people are already dead, so no one's, getting hurt. Potentially.
I guess it's also down to the wire of wherever that in between period was between Vietnam and when they're used in the program here, we don't get an explanation of like where these other guys came from. Obviously, the Vietnam guys were brushed under the rug. It would make sense that the rest were as well, but that means that like these are guys who were never given a proper burial, were never told their families that they were killed and whatnot. So it's kind of a little bit weird in that way to say like, yeah, these soldiers that we respect so much, we're just gonna throw them back out there, but now they're being mind controlled to keep fighting for us.
Now, obviously, from a moral standpoint, just to make myself clear here, the people who are being used should have probably opted in like an organ donor, as opposed to this idea of like you're brought back, especially if there's a risk of you actually becoming conscious again and remembering who you are. It's like, oh, you couldn't even let me rest in peace. Now I'm forced to be of service again. Like I'm still your slave even after like dying for the country. Like here I am. If you count being killed by a sergeant who went crazy and your own team is dying for the country, I don't know if I would count that, but
look, technically in Vietnam, very few people died for the country. All of that was just Vietnam.
That's fair. So yeah, so all this is set up. She's snooping around wanting to get photographs around their truck whilst they're inside talking about Luke's state and whatnot. So the big inciting incident that gets things going though is they catch her spying and taking photographs of this Unisol who was shot earlier, and like his wounds are healing up and he sits up out the ice because she thinks he's dead.
Yeah, the general came out and said like there were no injuries, there were no mortalities, we are a perfect fighting force. And then she opens up, she's like, so much for no injuries. Jesus Christ, this dude's like mincemeat.
Yeah.
And then his eyes open up and he starts sitting up and she just freaks out.
I think what I like about that moment, I dare call anything in this great writing per se, but I like the idea that she thinks she's onto them because she's like, oh, they said there was no dead bodies and I found one. Haha, I'm going to break this. Like she thinks that's the story, and it's like not even scratching the surface.
She found level 1 of this conspiracy. Meanwhile, it goes to like 76.
So she obviously the alarms start going off. She makes a run for it, gets in the car with Jimmy Olsen, and they drive off to try and get away. And they send a couple of Unisols out after her in a truck, which happens to be, of course, Van Damme and Lundgren, because, why not?
Right.
Unfortunately, though, Jimmy freaks out and ends up flipping the car. he's not an action man.
They get like a quarter mile, and then Jimmy's just not paying attention, just whoop, done.
She does have a funny line, though, because when they're like flipped upside down, and she's like, do you think we lost them? That actually made me laugh, because like, obviously not. They pull them out, and it basically we're in a situation where they're both on their knees, and it's emulating that opening again with a man and a woman on their knees, sort of begging for their lives. Not that they actually think they're in danger of being killed here per se; they just think they're going to get in trouble. But immediately, because Lundgren starts pointing a gun around, and Jimmy Olsen tries to kind of like sort of protect her or whatever, Lundgren shoots him in the head, and it's kind of like a big moment. And obviously, you cut back to the truck, and they're all like, "Whoa, he just shot the guy in the face! Like, stand down!"
Oh crap! We just shot a member of the press. This isn't gonna go well.
Yeah, this is where obviously all the conspiracy stuff comes up, where the military guy's like, "Hey, we can't admit to any of this. We have to cover this up and make sure they don't, get out with it." Because from this point on, when they're hunting her and Luke, obviously they want Luke back to be back in the program, and whatnot. But for her sake, they're basically just hunting her so that she can't spread this story, and they even like discredit her by like blaming her for the murder of her partner. Because like later on in the news, we see, reporter goes nuts and shoots her photographer. All right.
that was honestly like I was a little bit confused at the firing moment from earlier on, because I was like, but if she's just going to continue to go out and get stories, like I don't understand why she would be fired. It would just make more sense to keep her from a narrative standpoint with the channel. But then once they start that narrative of her being the one who killed the coworker in a cocaine-fueled like anger binge of being fired, I'm like, oh, okay, now it's all clicking together.
Yeah. And of course, as this happens, Van Damme starts to have flashbacks again to what happened and decides he has to protect the you know, her to protect Veronica, and he kicks the gun out of Lundgren's hand. Everyone in the back of the truck's freaking out and saying, why is he doing this? And he gets into the truck with her, and they go to drive off. Although their orders still work, because when they say stop moving now, he obeys it, and she's like, why'd you stop? And she realizes that he's still getting orders over the earpiece, so she just grabs his headset and throws it out the window, and you know, puts her foot in the pedal to get going.
Which, again, that's the first time that we see, like, when they're in the cooling section, they have the headsets off as well. But this is the first time we can see the headset can just be easily taken off. I thought for sure that thing was going to be, like, drilled into his skull or something, and was not, was actually some level of cybernetic. But no, it is just a fancy-ass headset that he just throws out of the car, and then she, like you said, slams on the gas.
Yeah, the only thing that's cybernetic, and I wouldn't even call it that, to be honest, is a tracker, which comes up a little bit later. So that's where you get, because I imagine what you were saying there is you were thinking you're going to get a scene of, like, how do we get this thing off? We're going to have to, like, pull it out of your skull. But instead you get, let's cut the tracker out later with the other thing. Yeah,
I mean, either that or just the thing where he continues to, like, have these orders coming in, but he has to, like, override them or something. Like, it's not a matter of him just not hearing the orders. It's a matter of him actually overcoming his programming.
Sure. Because, I mean, from here, basically, like, it just sets up again that he's got more strength and more speed and whatnot, because the car runs out of gas at one point, and he just gets out and starts pushing it, and she, like, gets surprised and then shuffles over to the driver's seat, and she looks down at the speedometer, and it's, like, 30 miles an hour, and it's like, what? I think the line that I really liked about this is later on, she says, who the hell are you? You push a car faster than my mother drives, which I thought was a funny line.
It was. She's got a great lines. Like, she's a well-written character. I if anything, I think that her character is, I don't want to say, like, the most endearing part of the story, but she is the part that's, like, for the fish out of water story that Jean-Claude's got going on, she's the one who really ties it back down and makes it entertaining. Yeah,
she's important, because if she didn't work, then the entire thing probably wouldn't work, because despite some of the action scenes being pretty decent, and despite maybe the two men doing their job but making themselves be charismatic or entertaining, a lot of this stuff would fall apart if you didn't have that character with the good lines to kind of tie it all together. So I think that's fair, for sure. But yeah, of course they can just track him. They've literally got a tracking device on him, so they're just following in their big truck. So we get a whole extended couple of sequences at a motel. Yes. Which is where he pushes the car to.
Again, for the sake of comedy, I get it. It's a funny enough scene, but we get this whole thing of this desk guy at the motel who's just, like, the worst. He's, like, scamming them out of money as they're trying to just, like, get to a phone, or, like, obviously at this point, Jean-Claude's realized that he's overheating and he needs to cool down ASAP. So the guy says, like, oh, well, we have ACs in the room, just $50 a night, you know, if you want to get in there.
Yeah, there's a whole thing where he's like, you need to get a room, there's phones. He does this little thing in his dialogue, though, where he keeps saying, at the end of a sentence. He's like, and there's also a small $20 security deposit. He does that a few times, which he only brings up because he sees that she's got more money on her and says, oh, there's a security deposit. Which, okay.
Although, it's the moment they said security deposit, and then knowing these guys were coming, I'm like, this is going to be played for a laugh. That $20 is going to cover how much damage is done here.
Yeah, there's a punchline to that where it's the guy's mother, like, comes in and says, $20 security deposit, huh?
That's the thing that surprised me a lot about this movie, is how many bits were played for comedy. I was thinking this was going to be, again, more in line with, like, a RoboCop at a certain point, where yes, there are some entertaining moments and good one-liners that get a kick, but, like, there are entire scenes and sequences that are played strictly for comedy.
Yeah, I mean, here he strips down because he's trying to cool down next to the AC, so he just takes off all his clothes. And she doesn't notice because she's trying to use the phone, but the Unisols have already, like, cut the phone lines down the street or whatever. So she walks out to try and go haggle with the guy at the desk again, and Luke just walks out after her saying you should stay in the room, it's not safe out here, and she turns around and he's just butt-ass naked. And they do a whole... Obviously, it's her reaction is slightly funny, being like, what the hell are you doing? But it's the mother of the desk guy who's, like, just sort of, like, ogling, and he's like, shame on you. And she does, like, a little sort of, like wetting her lips, kind of like, yeah, a little bit. I'm like, yeah, all right, granny.
Yeah, gotta be.
So, yeah, I mean, this is mostly establishing, because before the bad guys arrive, they do a whole thing where she gets like tons of ice, and he has like an ice bath, basically.
Yeah.
Where he's sitting in the ice. But once they come, there's a whole extended sequence here where the gimmick of it is that as the Unisols are shooting into the motel, trying to hit them, he's like running through the walls to get into the next hotel room. So,
okay.
Yeah, okay, on you go. What would you want to say?
Well, for me, I felt they overplayed the gag, or they overplayed the thing. So there's 4 rooms, and we have him bust through wall number 1. It's like, all right, that's a big moment. And there's like another couple in the room, and it's like, all right, cool. And then he just keeps going. He busts down the next wall. And then I'm like, okay, 2, fine, good. Then he does it again. And I'm like, are we just going to keep, like, is this just going to be like 17 rooms in a row he's just going to keep going to? Luckily, after the 3rd one, they say, oh, the next one's concrete. There's no way he's going to bust through that. But me, in my mind, I'm like, you sure? Because I didn't think he'd be able to bust through that level of drywall either, but he did it.
Yeah, that's a weird complaint to me. I don't know. Like, because to me, the joke is that he can clearly get through the regular drywall, but once he gets to an exterior wall, that's solid concrete. He can.
I think I would have been fine with it if it were the 1. I just don't understand why they did 3, especially like, okay, if you want to put it so that there's, because the way the search later on goes when they're looking for them is that there's the couple's room and then there's 2 rooms after that, and they move on to the later 2 rooms. If you want to have 1 room after that, that would make sense to me for the sake of the search. But the extra one where it's just him doing it twice in a row, I don't know. For me, that just seemed weird that they would put that in there to just have him bust through yet another wall.
I just don't think it's a big deal. I mean, to me, it's just a case of you're going through a string of them like shooting in a line, trying to hit him, and he just keeps getting further ahead into another room, until they literally hit a brick wall, and he can't go any further. And it's like, okay, what do they do now? Now they're trapped. I don't know. It's all quick enough that I don't. It's not like every time they get in a new room, there's like a moment to go, oh, what are we going to do now? I've got it. I'll jump through another wall. It's not like they stop and think about it. It becomes quicker and quicker as it goes. It's like an adrenaline building up thing, and then you hit a sharp stop.
I don't know. I guess for me, it almost felt like it was playing it as a comedy beat, less than an action beat, just because they were doing it so quickly, so frequently. And in doing so, doing it 3 times and then coming to the concrete wall felt like they overplayed the joke.
Rule of 3s. 3's the right amount. Right. I don't know. I just don't think it's a big deal.
I mean, I didn't. It's not like it's ruining the scene or anything for me. I just felt that it was weird that they busted through so many. At a certain point, I was just coming up with the Kool-Aid Man in my head. I'm just, oh yeah.
I never had that when I was a kid. Those commercials didn't air in the UK, so
fair enough.
It's not something that springs to mind.
I guess over there would be Boris Johnson or whatever. Just.
I mean, not in 19... I mean, he would have been alive in 1992. I don't know what he was doing. He was probably like a teenager or something in 1992, for all I know.
Everyone still just hated him.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, he's very unlikable, frankly. Mm-hmm. He's a evil little troll of a man. Anyway, so the comedy bit that does get them out of this, though, is that when the Unisols come in looking for them, they can't see them, and they pass by the couple that were in the bed that went past. They go on to the next couple of rooms, and then you realize the joke here is that they're hiding under the sheets with the couple. So you see the gun pop out, pointing at the guy, and he's like, do you have a car? He's like, give me the keys. And as they're like sort of like sneaking away from the bed, Veronica just keeps saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, as they just run away.
I honest to God, that one took me a minute. Maybe I'm just dense, but like, we see the shot of the couple. Obviously, they were doing something in bed. And they've got the covers up to their necks. And then all of a sudden, the hand with the gun comes up and aims under the guy's head. And he looks fearful. She looks fearful. But I didn't immediately put together that wasn't his hand. Like the way that it's positioned, it looks like it's actually his hand coming up from under the covers. And I was like, why is this guy threatening to shoot himself? I don't understand. And then it's like Jean-Claude speaks up and is like, do you have your keys? And I'm like, oh, okay. Got it. Understood.
I don't know. It's just a fun bit to end it on. And it's not the last bit Jean-Claude is... I mean, he's not naked in that scene. He was naked before. Right. It's not the last time, because it's almost the very next bit, because he's aware that they're following them, because they drive down however much road. In fact, actually, I should probably mention, when they drive away from the motel, they actually drive through the entire like concierge area and like through a window. So hence the joke about the security deposit, because not only are all the rooms shot up to shit with all these Unisols firing their machine guns, he's also driven a vehicle through one of them. So, good luck with that.
You set up the character to hate, and then you ruin everything he's ever built in his life. Works out well.
I mean, he's a sleazy guy, let's be fair. Yeah. He earns it. But yeah, they drive like down the winding desert road, and like he looks back the way they came, and you can see the big truck driving, maybe a mile or so back. Like it's clearly on their tail. So it's like, okay, they're tracking me somewhere. So they pull into a little station, and they go into the restroom, and he's like, all right. He just strips off, and she immediately says, oh, not this again. Like, can you at least keep your pants on this time? And of course, as she says that, the guy who works here is outside with his ear up against the door, being like, what the hell are you two doing in there?
It's like, nothing at all.
And then, of course, the payoff is as he gets completely naked, he turns round, he grabs her hand and puts her hand on his chest and says, I need you to look over my body and look for something unusual, something hard.
You say payoff, that's the setup over the next, 30 seconds of jokes where she's, groping around, and as her hands go off screen at the bottom, he's like, is that normal to have? And she's like, yes, that's normal to have.
I mean, I say that as a separate joke. I think the find something hard is the payoff to all the build up to that point,
That's
and then
fair.
and then it's just the penis gag at that. I mean, I guess they were both penis gags, but
right, that's what I'm saying.
But I don't know. Anyway, she finds a tracker in the back of his thigh or whatever it is, and he cuts it out. She doesn't want to use the knife, but he just stabs himself and makes her pull it out.
Yeah, again, it's one of those practical effects where they show the knife going into the skin and then him cutting around a little bit, and it's just a made up piece of technical stuff for the sake of the scene, but it does a hell of a lot better than any sort of special effects where the gore in this is minimal, but when they decide to hit it, they hit it hard.
Yeah, it's not even that gore. It's pretty tame, all things, even by...
Oh, yeah, it's not bloody or anything, but it's the same sort of thing of if you have a problem with needles, there are numerous scenes in this where it's going to mess you up because of the needle stuff.
Nah, I suppose that's true. There's some injecting oneself in the heart later on that comes up.
There's a scene of a needle going through a skull out through the front of the face.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's the one that I was thinking of. I don't even have that big of a problem with needles, but that's enough to trigger that in me.
That's fair. So weird note on this. So obviously the bad guys in the truck are coming up behind them, right? And they get out and they say, hey, tracker's here. They're somewhere here. They get out. The Unisols are looking around. And the reveal here is that they've had enough time to prep for them, so they open the restroom area, and the cardboard stand-up of a cowboy that was out front is there instead. So they shoot that, but there's gasoline leaked. They've trailed gasoline along the floor, and it sets the Unisols on fire. It causes an explosion. So we get Unisols walking around completely on fire, and they're trying to put them out because it's like, oh no, this is a tragedy. Our Unisols cost $500,000 each. We need to maintain them. This is terrible.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the main thing that happens in this scene. But the thing I want to point out is that while this is happening, to cover their body heat, because this never even came up before, but one of the ways they've got of scanning an area from the truck is they look for thermals, look for body heat. So apparently they knew this because they were hiding in the backs of some of the cars that were in this station, right? Just these derelict cars that were sitting there. And they were hiding in the trunks with just in ice, these big bags of ice, notably the exact same brand of ice that the motel had in the previous sequence. It seemed like a lazy little detail to me, but
I just need to share this tiny bit of trivia.
Oh, go on.
Apparently for this movie, the production got all of their bags of ice from the same 7-Eleven in Arizona, and because of that, the owner of that 7-Eleven was invited to the ice factory because they were like, you are our highest seller store in the entirety of the United States. God bless you, sir.
Is ice that profitable?
Apparently to the ice factory, if someone's got to call in and say, I need 100,000 pounds of ice for my store.
Yeah. The thing that got me, though, is that when they pop out of the backs of the cars, right, they're all in separate cars, right? And when I say all of them, I mean Luke, I mean Veronica, and for some reason the guy who runs this station also was hiding with the ice in one of the other cars. And notably, he has swapped clothes with Luke Devereaux. This screams deleted scene to me of like them going up to him and saying, "Hey, I need to swap clothes with you" or something, because it's really silly when you stop and think about it.
It's probably deleted because the scene literally played out as, "I need your clothes," and they were like, "Okay, that's a bit too on the nose. We might want to scrap that one."
Because he comes out and he's wearing like the sort of the military vest that all the Unisols are wearing, and Luke's now wearing like a mechanic's jacket with the name Joe like on the tag. And it's like, okay, all right, I guess that's just what you are. So they get in the car and they drive off, and all the bad guys are too distracted with the fire and everything to be dealing with.
Yeah, they actually break into the Humvee, the killdozer thing, whatever, and steal some paperwork.
Oh, that's
on
right. Because when she was looking for the
Unisols.
Yeah, when she was looking for the tracker, or maybe it was before then, but she's like, "What the hell are you?" And he's like, "I don't know, but I want to find out." Like that's actually the first time he's got like a proactive call to action. It's like, I'm not just running away now. I'm not just protecting you on instinct. I actually want to know what they did to me. Like, what am I? Kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And that's again from this point on, and even up until this point, he has been a very reluctant hero. He has been very much of just like, I want to escape. I don't want to fight these other guys. I don't want to continue on with this. I just want to get out of here. And that's, for the rest of this movie, essentially his character thing of reluctant hero. He is forced into these situations, but he would absolutely love to just not be a part of this at all.
Yeah, that's why it kind of pays off nicely in the ending when there's a big moment where he rises in the rain with fire behind him in slow motion because now he's ready to kick the shit out of the bad guy. Like,
right.
So the fact that he's been reluctant the entire movie, but now he actually wants to F him up is, a moment. So,
but as they're driving away, turns out that there was one character not caught in the fire because he's just the smartest boy, and that is Dolph Lundgren.
He was in the back seat, and he jumps out and grabs him, and ultimately they basically crash the car, hit the brakes to make him go flying out of the window, which is actually a payoff to an earlier line, because Luke insisted that she wear her seatbelt, and she put up a fuss, like, after everything we're going through, you care about an effing seatbelt? And then he goes flying out the windshield, and she's like, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I'm like, all right, okay.
This movie, in a lot of ways, is also just like morals that are marketed towards kids or like teenagers. It's like, wear your seatbelt, don't smoke.
Which is weird because it's R-rated. It doesn't seem like the sort of movie to put those sort of simple messages in. But
yeah, it's weird. But like even the don't smoking thing, like they spend a long time showing that Ronnie's character like smokes up all the time, and then we have a part where Luke reads the Surgeon General's warning on the side and then tosses it out because it's a threat to her. And then by the end of the movie, she's like, maybe I'll quit. You did good today, Luke.
He's very good at two shoes, which I guess also ties into the Superman parallels that we were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
So, very interesting. So, is the next time we see them now when they're at the diner and he eats like a truckload of food?
Yeah, but we get all the interstitial scenes of this is where Lundgren officially snaps again.
Yeah, he basically snaps when the general says the mission's over, this is too much of a mess, we're going back to base and we're going to have to clean it up like properly, we're going to have to like fess up and whatever. He says the mission's cancelled, and immediately Dolph Lundgren's like, traitor, and shoots him in the eye, and then that's basically like, he takes command of the truck.
Yeah, up until this point, they always are referred to as GR number. So Lundgren is 13, but as he's saying, like, you hear me, GR 13, or mission's canceled. He's like, my name is Sergeant Andrew Scott, or whatever it is. And he's like, I'm taking control of this mission. And so he's fully back to his old self. He remembers everything, and he's ready to go.
Yeah. And I'll just probably stick to this side of it for a little bit, because there's all, we kind of cut between this and like, what Van Damme and Veronica are doing, but this stuff kind of amounts to, he wants to hunt down Van Damme and Veronica. He kills a couple of the people when they try various things. There's a whole bit where the scientists clearly know he's crazy and they want to stop him, but they have to play along because they're terrified of him, right? He's big, he's scary and whatnot.
And they're repairing the other Unisols who were damaged in the fires.
Yeah, because he wants his platoon ready again, He wants to have his team. So there's a whole bit where, like, the main scientist guy goes over to him and says, hey, Sergeant Scott, you're almost overheating. It's time to deal with that. And he's like, oh, you're right. It's nap time. So he goes into the place and like goes to sleep. And the other scientist says exactly what I was thinking, which is, why the hell did you tell him that? Just let him like get weak and pass out. Like, it's foolproof.
He's already made another ear necklace, man. He was busy with that. He could have just passed out and not even noticed.
Yeah, we could have done something then for sure. But the main scientist is like, no, I want to like to intentionally like inject him or turn his thing off or whatever to deal with
it. They're gonna give him more memory juice or whatever, enough that it's a lethal dose.
Yeah. But of course it's the younger scientist who's like, you know what, I'll do it. I'll go in the suit and inject him or whatever. But of course it's like a horror movie scene where he goes to press the button and he wakes up and grabs his hand and he's like, what he did is like, I was just checking. I thought your injector was malfunctioning. He's like, let's find out. And he throws the scientist down in the chair and has him get injected.
He has the injector come up, and it's already, they've said it's a lethal dose. So yes. I'm sitting there like, oh no, it's going to be the slow, like painful death where the memory juice takes over. And he's like, nah, I don't got time for that. And he just shoves his head down onto the needle enough that it pops out through his cheek. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's another option, I guess.
Yeah, so now the main scientist is left on his own, just being like, oh no, I'm terrified now.
Yeah, he's like, I don't really have another way out of this. And I think the next time we see them is we have Lundgren going and threatening some like truckers who are all in cowboy gear.
Yeah, it's like a strip club or something, and he's outside and he goes up and says, hey, I'm looking for a deserter, a POW. Have you seen a man and a woman in this type of car? And they all just make fun of him and say, what's with the ear necklace, dude? I've got one just like it, made of noses. And Dolph Lundgren just starts kicking mother effers in the face until they're scared. And while this is going on, the main scientist is convinced the other Unisol, the beefy one from Gladiator, he's like, hey, Sergeant Scott's given an order. Will you obey that order? He's like, yes. He wants you to hold this grenade for 30 seconds and then drop it. Now, obviously, the scientist intends on running away during this 30 seconds. Instead, this Universal Soldier, when he grips the grenade, also grips his fingers and he can't free himself. So we just get this countdown to like the grenade going off. So Dolph Lundgren's outside and he just hears like the bang and he turns around and there's just like some smoke coming from the sides of the truck and it's like, oh no, well.
Yeah, that just reminded me of my initial thoughts as we see in the first scene after they all come back from the terrorist briefing. We see that they are put into like some level of sleep and that the general's over the comms talking to Jean-Claude saying like, you don't have any memories. There is no you before that. And he's like trying to guide him through almost like meditation style, hypnosis style. And what it really reminded me of, shockingly before its time, is this is kind of the way that a lot of people interact with the AI software nowadays, of like, you have to convince the AI of like certain things in its own backstory in order to have this conversation with it. And even in this scene here, it's not that he can come up and say to the soldier like, hey, hold this grenade and then drop it in 30 seconds, because that's not how the backstory works now. He knows there's a chain of command. So he has to tell the AI, this command came from this guy, and therefore you would follow it in that situation, right? And the soldier's like, yeah, of course. So it's just, I don't know, it struck me as oddly ahead of its time in a lot of ways.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and because of this, though, his remaining Universal Soldiers, his Unisols, are damaged from the grenade. So we cut almost directly to him dragging their bodies in a supermarket. So it's this brightly lit supermarket, and all these just civilians are just sort of noticing and being like, what the hell is this? And he's like, where's your freezer? And like, the employee just kind of points. So he takes them out of the meat locker and like throws them in there. And we just get this extended sequence around here, or maybe a little bit later we cut back to it, but it leads to him like just making a big speech in the supermarket to all these scared people, and then like some security guards show up, this
is where he really starts hamming it up. This is where he really starts, once he gives a speech and he's just like, all of them are traitors, and then like you said, security guards, he shoots them in the head as they approach, and he's just like, see, already they're being traitors.
You don't have any idea what it's like out there, out in the battlefield. Like he goes on for like a few minutes.
You got a kick ass or kiss ass? I'm like, okay, buddy, sure.
He's compelling to watch, though. He's very entertaining. I can't fault.
Oh yeah.
But like I was alluding to, though, during this portion of the movie, they Luke and Veronica want to read through what they stole from the truck to try and figure out anything about what what happened to him, where he came from, so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing this at a diner. They're at a diner and they're having lunch. And he doesn't really know what to do. We don't really know how the Unisols consume food, if they do consume food. I mean, he clearly can consume food because it happens in the scene.
Yeah, he's still a person.
So presumably, I don't know, they just inject stuff into them and that's how they get their energy. But
yeah, Soylent Green or whatever.
Yeah. But she goes to make a phone call based on one of the names that pop up. It's like a scientist that pops up in the book. She's like, oh, I can't really make heads or tail of this, but there's a name here. I'm going to go call this number. You know, stay here and eat your lunch. And basically, we get this sequence where Van Damme looks around because he doesn't really know what to do, and he sees this old man like eating with a knife and fork. So he's like, okay, knife and fork. I'll pick these up and I'll copy what he's doing. And he takes a bite of the meat and he takes a bit of mashed potato, and he's like, this is interesting. And we cut away to her, and when we come back, he's like ordered more plates of food. There's like a plate with 2 hot dogs on it. There's a second special.
He's got the whole menu in front of him.
And he's just taking bites out of each thing. It's like he's discovering like pleasure for the first time. And he's just like, oh, I'm into all this. I'm having this. I'll have some of that. And eventually the waitress is like, have you got enough money to pay for all of this? And he just kind of stares at her blankly. And she's like, whoa, hey, chef, we got a deadbeat out here. So this tough chef guy comes out and tries to intimidate him, like, yeah, you're going to pay for this, buddy.
I love the way that he does it, though, is he comes out and he's like, I've been on this stove for all this slop for you for the past few hours. And he's like, it's very good food. He's like, I know it's good food, but you got to pay me for it. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how to do that. And he's like, oh, well, we're going to have problems, buddy. And then they do the bit where he's like, look, I don't want to hurt you, but obviously this chef is like big and burly, whereas Jean-Claude's a very slim fit kind of guy. And then they laugh. He throws a punch, and whole big scene breaks out of different people trying to go against Jean-Claude.
But the best detail of it though is that so the chef tries to hit him, he blocks it and does one hit, just one, doesn't like overly beat him up or anything, just one swift hit to get rid of him. He goes back to eating. Then another person comes up and tries to hit him. He keeps going back to try to eat every time someone like attacks him, which I thought was quite good.
Oh yeah, and I think one point he even says like, I just want to eat. Like, I just want this food. Like, please stop coming after me. I will give full failure marks to the dude in the plaid shirt because he comes up to Jean-Claude no less than 3 times. Each time he gets knocked out with a single punch or a kick, and he keeps coming back. So learn your limits, dude. You didn't have a chance in hell.
Yeah, and then eventually at the end, he throws like one guy out a window, and this is when Veronica comes back, sees the guy come out the window, pokes her head into the now empty window, and says, "How's lunch?" And Van Damme just smiles at her because he's like,
yeah.
Have you tried this thing? It's called food. It's great. I love it.
It's a comedy scene more than anything, just so she can go out and get the doctor's address from the phone. But like, it's fun. It's a fun little moment.
Honestly, like, it makes me hungry. I like, it's just it's a lot of decent looking food just sitting in front of him. He's just picking what he wants. For some reason, it's one of the more memorable scenes in the whole movie for me. So, you know, credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
But
then, like, she got the address. They drive to wherever the doctor's home is, and
I think this is when they were in Utah. I want to say I could be wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, roundabout. It's at this point, it's like day 3 or 4 of their trip, because they do have multiple like timestamps come up of saying like this location day 3, this location day 4. But at that point, she goes and we meet up with the doctor. And I'll be honest, you were saying the other part with the deleted scene at the gas station. This whole sequence felt like deleted scene heaven for me, because he is so underplayed.
It barely explains a goddamn thing. He says something about, oh, we developed this thing, it makes them overheat, so we have to cool them down or they'll have a stroke. And that's basically
it's like flash biology. Like, everything is like hyper accelerated, I think they said. So like all the healing and stuff is accelerated. They get strength and speed from that, but because of it, they overheat, and therefore they need to be cooled down constantly or else they'll have a stroke.
Yeah. But there's not much of an explanation, and I think something that comes up as we get back, not in the next 2 movies, but when we get back to Van Damme in the 4th one, I'm pretty sure in that movie he's just normal, like he's just like a normal human being, and I don't remember there being ever an explanation as to why he's normal now. Like, what changed? Like, did they do something to him? Did they get a procedure? Because if he's normal at a certain point, then isn't he just technically been successfully resurrected? And then that's kind of a big deal. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of a huge deal.
Yeah, scientists reverse death. You just have to go through this middle process where you're a super soldier in between. Clearly, too many downsides.
So they talk to him quickly. It's not that much to it, and then almost immediately he's like, "Hey, I got you a bus ticket, Veronica." And I was like, "Wait, you don't know how to pay for stuff? Where did you get money for a bus ticket?" But whatever, I'll keep going.
He just stole it off some guy.
Probably.
Some other guy was going to LA, and he just threw him through a windshield.
But he's like, "Get on this bus to Los Angeles. You're like, this guy's hunting me. He's not hunting you. Off you go." And I actually really like this, but it's typical movie cheese where you think she gets on the bus and he's getting ready to go back in the car, but then the bus pulls away and she's standing there, and it's this sweet moment of him looking over and she's made this choice and she's looking back at him like, say, hey, I do care. You're not just a story to me. I actually care about you. Yeah. Which is something that obviously earlier on she kept saying she didn't care about him. It's just a story. So this is kind of a payoff to that moment. And that's all fine. But they do a double thing here where the bus behind her then moves out the way and reveals an army of police who are hunting them for killing Jimmy Olsen earlier in the movie.
Also, she's been framed for more murders in the meantime. Like the ones that the Unisols have been doing.
Yeah, the motel and whatnot.
I love that second reveal because you see Van Damme's face drops while she's still smiling and she's like, what? What is it? She turns around, she sees the whole army and she's like, oh, okay. I didn't see this. Maybe I should have gotten on the bus. Yeah,
I like it because the reveal that she's still there is pretty typical and tropey. Right, it's not bad, but it's pretty normal movie stuff. But the second reveal is what's like, okay, you know what we were doing. This was funny. This was funny that you did it again, but now there's just an army of police behind her. So this is what actually leads us to our big set piece where they're in like a prison bus and there's a couple of cop cars like escorting the bus. And that's when Lundgren in the big military truck comes up and we get our big sequence of Lundgren just like throwing grenades at them and ramming into them and whatnot.
I will give Lundgren full credits. Like as a character, I'm giving his character full credits because this is a prison bus. So what that means is all the windows have bars on them. All of them have like some level grading and then they also have the glass. So he goes in with a gun first, shoots out essentially all the glass. But then he starts lobbing grenades, and those bars are still on the window, which means he is threading these grenades through bars, essentially the exact same width as the grenade, to get them into the bus.
Yeah, and he drives up front and kills the driver. So the guy from Gladiator is the one that's actually driving the truck. He's the one other soldier that's still left, right? Lundgren's got one person that he can still rely on. But otherwise, it's mostly just him now, and he's blowing things up. And effectively, the sequence is a lot of stuff. It's a lot of practical stuff, driving out in this desert road. I love that the location kind of develops as it moves on to where they realize they're in, I don't even know what you call this, but like, they're basically in the middle of a canyon where there's like a big drop on either side, and this road's in the middle of this just one bit.
I sure, like, you could call it like Mesa, you could call it whatever. I call it Wile E. Coyote territory.
But this is a real place, though. This is not an effect. They really shot this somewhere, so you know that this is a real place. It's not something they've made up. So they found some crazy location in the desert somewhere where this road has like a big drop off. I mean, it's not like the roads get no room before the drop off. There's a good, like, I don't know, maybe 7 meters on either side of the road. But but in the scheme of this bus swerving because it's trying to avoid grenades and whatnot. It's not a lot of room to play with, so it feels like a big spectacle.
It looks great. I mean, the only thing that I was kind of, and again, this is just suspension of disbelief. They show that the driver was shot, and then the bus for a while continues to like swerve back and forth on the main road before it goes off entirely. And I'm like, surely it should have swerved once and then just started like going in long circles for a while. But that's, the story needs to play out the way it plays out.
Yeah, it's whatever. I mean, Luke basically has to sort of lockpick the cage so that he can get to the front and start taking control of the truck or the bus. So,
and then he tells her, like, hey, again, he's coming after me. You need to jump out. And she's like, no, I'm not abandoning you. So he says, okay, fine, we'll jump out together.
And then pushes her.
And he just pushes her. He's just like, nope, sorry, your safety's more important.
Yeah. And it basically, like, he's in the bus and the truck's pushing the bus off the edge. So Van Damme climbs out on top of the bus, right? Which looks really great because again, it's a stunt man like on top of this bus next to a cliff, and there's it's all really nice big spectacle stuff that you don't really see a lot these days. And he shoots the other soldier, the one that's driving, in the face multiple times so that he's not in control anymore. And basically, this ensures that the truck is going to also drive off the cliff because Lundgren's not got enough time to like pull this guy's foot off the pedal and whatnot. So he jumps off onto the dirt, and this big truck, we get a miniature of the truck going off the cliff edge and flipping over, explosions. The subwoofer was going nuts. It's a whole nice little set piece.
Okay. I do want to say, this is my own, I don't have a good media setup. I've just got a normal TV here. This movie is the definition of whispers and explosions, where I have to go in with the volume every time a scene changes to get it countered to whatever I need for that moment.
It probably doesn't help that Van Damme's like mumbling in an accent sometimes.
Right. Absolutely.
There's straight up a scene later on where I did not hear what he said because he just like, even though I have the 5.1 and I run it louder than I probably should, if I'm honest. Even with all that, though, I still didn't make out his, French rumblings.
Right, yeah. Oh, we skipped over that one line, which
Belgian rumblings, I should say. Anyway.
Yeah, well, in this movie, she says something along the lines of just like, so where are you from? I figured like France or something because of the accent. And he just turns like, what accent?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, he's like, I do not have an accent.
Yeah, big set piece, fun moment. There was like one cop in a cop car who pulls up and tries to arrest our main two characters, and it's actually her that knees him in the balls and knocks him out, and she just drops a line about having brothers, so that's why she knows how to fight.
Can't we just have her know how to fight? I know this is the 90s, and like we have to have this thing where like Michelle Rodriguez is just like, oh yeah, I have a family with like 17 brothers. It's like, fine, whatever, but can't they just know how to do that?
Michelle Rodriguez is more of a 2000s thing, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but just like that idea, that era where like we can't just have a girl know how to throw a punch into a groin. God knows that they're not capable of that. We have to explain that, oh, well, they grew up with brothers and that's why they're not all prissy and fancy like you'd expect a girl to be. Yeah. It's like we've seen her for an hour at this point in this movie. We know she's not prissy and fancy. She can just know how to punch.
Yeah, this did not seem like a character that she knew how to do this. Before she didn't need to explain it. I think that's completely fair to say. It felt like it fit who she already was. But regardless, they steal the cop car and drive it to Van Damme's house because she wants to help take him home.
Which I am going to give credit to this movie just a little bit in that they recognize the fact that he does have an accent and they don't try to like ignore it.
Yeah,
like,
the mother's French, I think.
The mother's French. They live in Louisiana, like the French quarter of like New Orleans sort of area. So I liked that. I liked the fact they leaned into it. The only part that I'm going to say is they are driving a stolen cop car from Utah to Louisiana. That is not a short drive, man.
Also, maybe there never was any, but when they arrive at the house, I noticed that the lights in the top of the car weren't there. It's like they'd taken them off, and I'm like, there's still a big stripe that says, sheriff or something on the side. It feels it's not exactly disguising the fact that it's a cop car.
There were lights on when they took the car, and then they lost it. Again, that kind of screams like maybe there was another 10-minute segment in there that they just cut out.
Yeah, either that or it was a continuity issue where when they shot the other scenes, like, oh shit, we don't have the lights to go on top of the car anymore. We'll just have to deal with it, I guess. Like they're just gone now. But it did stick out to me. So we meet his parents, who are obviously shocked to see their son, who they thought had died in Vietnam 20 plus years ago,
who looks exactly the same age he was when he left.
Yes. I feel like him being back from the dead, though, supersedes the age thing, though. I get why that's the first shock, and they'll ask about the age later. But first of all, he's just alive, and that's kind of a big deal.
Well, in fairness, because of that earlier scene, they explicitly said that they were not going to be reported as dead. They were going to be reported as MIA.
Oh, so true.
Theoretically, they could have always held out some hope. But
to be fair, do you really think they were... Like, they probably had to make peace with it and think he was dead for a long time.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I at a certain point, it's just like, oh, so either he's completely just forgotten his entire life and has just been living in Vietnam post-war for all these years, or he's dead. I'm sure they accepted he was dead.
But notably, though, his dad is played by Rance Howard, father, of course, to legend Clint Howard.
Of course. I knew that. Who's Clint Howard?
Yeah. Well, you know who Ron Howard is, right?
Yes.
Well, that's Clint Howard's brother. The joke was I was saying Clint instead of Ron because I thought it was funnier.
Got it. To be fair, there's enough Howards floating around. I didn't know they were all related, but
yeah,
fair enough.
I mean, I'm pretty sure this is their father anyway. But Clint Howard's in a lot of low budget stuff. Although he's done a couple of big things. He was a kid actor in Star Trek once upon a time. But of course, I always it's the same thing. Whenever I think of Bryce Dallas Howard, I always like to refer to Clint Howard as her crazy uncle. You know?
Yeah, but for Bryce Dallas, it took me longer than I would like to admit to know that there was a relation to Ron Howard. So then you throw in extra Howards, and I'm just like, oh, so it's just the whole family. Everyone
the whole family's in Hollywood, apparently.
Gotcha.
Yeah. He kind of looks like Ron Howard a little bit, actually, though, to be fair. Randstad is. You can see it in his face. Yeah. So, anyway. So, yeah, we've got a Howard in this. Not Clint, of course, not the royalty of the family, but Howard all the same. So, yeah, obviously, at this point in the movie, like, we're kind of led to believe that Dolph Lundgren died when the vehicle went over the cliff, but obviously, like, well, the movie's still going. It doesn't feel like... See, if they'd arrived and the music swelled as they hugged the parents and then the credits rolled, yeah, fair enough, but it doesn't feel like we're ending, so it's like, well, he's obviously going to pop back up again still.
Yeah, the justification for the rest of this part right here is basically her saying, okay, now that we're safe, now that it seems like the military's not doing whatever, I need to clear my name because I have a bunch of murders listed under me. And also we're going to expose you. We're going to show, like, we have all this evidence that you were born back then. You still look the same. We can say that the whole government operation was going on. So she, as the rain starts coming down, she goes out to meet up with somebody who she has connections with around here to share the story. And then, oopsie, somehow Dolph Lundgren is back.
Well, you see, a Terminator is hard to kill, so they keep showing up when you think they're dead. That's kind of part of the
Look,
stick.
I'll fully accept that he didn't die in the truck accident like that. Yeah, no, they've shown they can survive crazy things here. My part is, how in the hell did he get to Louisiana?
I actually thought of this, but I think because he knows who he's hunting, I think he probably just looked up like where he lived, where his parents lived. It's just the most likely place that he would go. I mean, how he physically got there, I don't know. He stole a car or something.
Yeah, hitchhiked, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, quite quickly, he's apprehended Veronica. Turns out he's also kidnapped both the parents and has them in the barn tied up. And he calls out Luke. And at this point, it's a thunderstorm. There's the lightning flashes.
It's everything.
Yeah, it's super, 90s movie action atmosphere. So he comes out, he gets like a more like old-fashioned shotgun from like the closet, but he quickly puts it down. He's like, no, look, you want me, you don't want them. But it obviously, we have to do the dramatic callbacks to the opening. We have to get like her running away as Lundgren like lobs a grenade at her and all that.
Yeah, we get a whole thing in here where Luke is basically like, he's fully gotten back to himself now. He recognizes who he is, but he's trying to talk down Lundgren by saying like, hey, look, the war is over. Like we're done. You don't have it. He's basically trying to get him through this PTSD attack. But Lundgren, as we know, is just totally lost in the sauce. He's absolutely crazy. And he's just like, oh, it's not over for me. I told you to shoot that girl, so you're going to have to do it now. And that's where we first get the that moment you were talking about of he takes the gun, he aims it at her head, pulls the trigger, but the clip is empty. And I can't tell whether that was intentional on his part or if he was like surprised it was empty. But good Lord, the cheese he plays off of that line is incredible. Yeah,
because he beats up Jean-Claude for a bit, right? And it's also established at this point that he's been juicing. He's been taking more of these injections on his own of this stuff that makes him stronger. And he like shows that he's still got some in his like vest and whatnot, which comes up later, of course. But he beats up Jean-Claude. So Jean-Claude's basically barely standing up at this point. So he holds him up and he puts the gun in his hand and sort of points at her and says, now where are we going to shoot her? In the stomach? In the chest? How about we shoot her in the head?
It's the worst episode of Dora the Explorer I've ever seen.
And then the gun clicks and it's empty. And he starts laughing and he's like, it's empty!
You're not playing that up. That's how it sounds.
Yeah. It's empty. He says it again. And then she runs away and that's when he lobs the grenade at her. And He's like, run! And, you know, it looks like he might have killed her. Obviously, I didn't expect that he actually had, but it looks like he might. But this is the moment...
It's the exact same way that the previous woman died. In the rain, running away, hit by a grenade.
So he stands up in slow motion with the fire behind him that's just kind of spread from, you know, Dolph Lundgren doing shit. So he stands up in slow motion with this sort of music. The music's like sort of da-da-dun. Like, he's like, oh, he's ready to go now. He's going to fight.
That music works perfectly. I'm fine with it, but I also want to play like the Rocky IV theme as well. Like, I just want to... anything that's like super pumped up inspirational would work here.
And he goes to, he does a bunch of kicks, he does a bunch of whatnot, and he's trying his best, but it's just not quite enough. Like, he's trying to kick him, I think, at one point even into the wood chipper, which comes back up later. But ultimately, it's when he kicks him down and like the syringe with the super soldier serum in it like falls to the ground, and he's like, oh shit, I could use that. So just as Lundgren's distracted by threatening his parents or whatever, he injects himself in the heart.
Which once again goes back to the childhood morals. Don't smoke, wear your seatbelt, inject random syringes into your heart.
So then Lundgren throws a few more punches, and Van Damme's able to actually catch one and like sort of has the strength now to like hold him off. So it's like, okay, it's mano a mano now. Now he's got no excuse, and fight plays out. There's kicks, there's whatnot. And then ultimately the fight ends with him getting kicked into the wood chipper, right?
It's like a combine harvester sort of thing.
Yeah, there's like spikes. Well, yeah, I was thinking that at first, but the reason why I thought it was a wood chipper is because at the end when he hits the button, it felt like it like chewed him up like a wood chipper. But I can see what you're saying.
I think the harvester, that part of it is like separates out the like bits that you actually want to collect from like the husks, and that's the husks that makes sense. That would be flying out there. Yeah,
because he basically gets impaled on all the spikes on the harvester bit at the front, and he does have his one last like, I'm still alive, bitch, as he like grabs his head and tries to pull his head down onto the spike. But then Van Damme breaks his arm and has his one-liner before he hits the button. He says, "You've been discharged, Sarge."
It's all right.
It's not. Yeah,
it's not the strongest one-liner, but
it's a bit lame. Honestly, Dolph Lundgren has like one of the best one-liners of all time in a movie that no one knows about. It's a movie called I Come in Peace. It's also called Dark Angel, where he's fighting like an alien.
I think you've mentioned this before. Yeah,
and he has such a great one-liner at the end of it. It's like so good. So unfortunately, Discharge Sarge is not quite as catchy.
I will say one of the more brutal deaths, though, we see, like you said, it coming out of the side of the wood chipper, which then leads to the fantastic line when he goes over to check on Ronnie. She sits up and she's like, "Where is he?" And he's like, "Around."
See, that's much funnier. That's a funny line. It's a funny line. And the movie just goes to credits when they're hugging. They're just happy. Off we go. That's the movie.
Ronnie never got to clear her name. She is in prison, and he lives on that farm.
Yeah, we presume that she did clear her name, just because otherwise it's not exactly that happy an ending. Like, oh, she goes to prison for the rest of her life.
Her sentence is starring in Kazam. Which some would say is a fate worse than death, but
yeah, it's got that thing that some action movies do, where the middle, like the big set piece that's clearly the most expensive and the most impressive is the car chase. It's the big trucks and the bus and all that stuff. And then the finale's a lot smaller, but arguably can work as being more impactful because it's more personal. It's where more of the drama is.
Yeah, I think my only critique with the ending, and this is kind of a pacing thing more so than like a script writing thing, is he doesn't ever really talk to his parents. There isn't ever really a moment where like we get the emotional reunion of like them hugging on the front porch or whatever, but like I wanted to know like what happened to them in the meantime, like how have they been dealing.
It feels like if the movie was more interested in being a more fleshed out science fiction film, you absolutely would have a scene where they have a conversation before it jumps to Ronnie's ready to leave, and that's where everything happens. Because there is one scene with Ronnie and Van Damme on the couch. This is the scene where I didn't really hear what he said because he just mumbled, and I was like, I have no idea what emotional thing he's saying to her. I'm just going to roll with it. I'm not going back and putting on subtitles. You can't make me. But
as far as I remember, it's just basically him just being like, yeah, you know, I look pretty good for a 50-year-old. Ha ha ha. Something like that.
But he you know, he's looking at some old photographs and whatnot, but this is where you'd get into this real science fiction exploration of it, is him actually talking to his parents who have aged another 25 years, and he's all of a sudden back, and maybe even he starts to like question things like, what could his life be now? Where does he go from here? Should he still be alive? Like all these important questions. Yeah. Does he want to be alive? I guess they play that card a little bit during the fight where he says, "No, I'm alive," and he kind of, you know, kicks him.
Yeah, that's Lundgren says something along the lines like, "You and me are both dead," and then he says like, "No, I'm alive," and it feels like the payoff to a story we didn't have. It feels like there was an entire idea where they were battling with whether or not he's alive or dead, but the only other part that we got was during the visit with the doctor, where the doctor's saying like, "Oh yeah, hey, if you want to stay alive, you got to do this." And he's like, "Oh no, but we're not alive. We're already dead." But there's no emotional transition between the two. Like there's no time for showing where he suddenly finds value in life.
Again, that would be where the real science fiction part of the story would come from. Not the mechanics, but the science fiction exploration of the idea would be the stories about, oh, it's this man who thinks that he was already supposed to, because it could be a stand-in for someone who think like with survivor's guilt, someone who thought they should have died in combat and can't like live again until they learn to realize it. And that's what this could be an allegory for, is someone who literally died, doesn't accept that they have to have the right to live again, but by the end is like, you know what, no, I do want to live again, yada yada. But the movie's just not want to be that deep.
Yeah, no, and I don't blame it. Like I think that if it did everything else up until that point the same, and then all of a sudden had this really big heart-to-heart with the parents on the couch, I feel like it'd be out of place.
Oh, possibly,
it didn't seem like that would be what would be the right thing to do then. I think
you'd probably need
jumping into the fight works.
Yeah, you'd probably need a few more things to see that thematically earlier on if you wanted to do it. But yeah, it is a tight-paced movie though. You know, like you know, it's like 95 minutes. It doesn't waste much time. The Van Damme works in his role. Lundgren's actually very charismatic and arguably is a bigger asset to the movie than Van Damme is. And then I think Veronica's also a pretty entertaining character. She kind of like ties it all together, honestly, as the exposition question asker. You know? So yeah, it's fun. It's not deep, right? There's probably a million things I could say that they could have done better if they wanted to make a better movie, but they're trying to make a B movie, and it is relatively fun, and I think it holds up better than most of Roland Emmerich's other movies, frankly.
Oh yeah, like that's the thing, is as much as it is him toned down, I can feel Emmerich's fingerprints on this in terms of like the development that's given to characters is very surface level. It's very tropey in a lot of ways, so I can feel all that on him, but it is, again, with the practical effects, with this smaller scale to it, it does have a little something that later Emmerich films have just not had in a long time.
If he'd been making movies throughout the 80s, I could see me being quite fond of them. I could see me being fond of, like, you know, depending on who the actors were in the movies and whatnot. I could see if he was still in a world where he was making smaller scale movies with practical effects, I could have seen a lot more, you know, gems. Right. I mean, B-movie gems, but gems all the same. Whereas, you know, obviously where his career went with technology getting more advanced, just kind of went on a trajectory that just wasn't that good. But
yeah. Well, I mean, we could always do the movie that came right before this one called Moon 44, which currently has a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I'm pretty sure I've got that on a list somewhere to do at some point.
Cool. Great. I was kidding.
And hey, one day we have to do his Godzilla movie. Like,
yeah.
You know, I want to do more of the Japanese ones before we get to that, but it's definitely going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I feel like you got to do a bunch of the Japanese ones just so you can know what true failures happened when they finally crossed over to America.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I lost the vote, but maybe in about a year's time, we'll just start doing them because I want to.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
That's the thing about the votes. The votes are a bunch of things that like we're willing to do, so eventually they're just going to show up anyway.
Yes. So about what you want right now. That's the question. So yeah, I mean, that's the movie pretty much. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we get into the questions.
Not really. The only thing that I think we just kind of skipped over, because like we said, the movie skipped over too, is just how lacking that doctor scene was. Yeah. Like Jerry Orbach is credited pretty high up on IMDb, and he is nothing in this movie. Like he barely has 5 lines to string together. So I think that out of all of the things I wanted from this movie, that was the one that even when I came to terms with what the movie is, I wanted more from that. I wanted that to be a little bit more fleshed out. But everything else, yeah, it's tightly paced, it gets through it fast, and it's definitely just a B movie that's having fun with itself.
Yeah. All right. In that case, then, what was your scene of the movie?
I think my scene of the movie is going to be, it's kind of cut across two different, not scenes, but like it's all one sequence, which is the grocery store stuff. Where he drags, Dolph Lundgren drags in the Unisouls and then has this big long speech of like, oh, you guys don't know what it's like out there. I'm here to defend you, da-da-da, all that stuff. I think that that's just cheesy enough from Lundgren that it's funny. It's also just got some good visual gags with him dragging these two dead guys through the aisles of this grocery store and everyone's just kind of reacting. It's not like the biggest action beat. It's not even, I would say, the funniest moment in the movie, but it just really works for me the whole way through. So that's going to be it for me.
Yeah, I mean, that one's good because it's kind of where he gets like his character, right? You know, up until that point, he's very kind of like stoic and, dare I say, Terminator-y in the way he's like around. But there he gets to start hamming it up, so he gets quite memorable at that point. Right. I mean, the bus chase is really good. I do mostly like the finale as well in the rain, just because all the cheesy slow motion and all the kicks and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'll go with the bus chase, but it's kind of close. There's not like it's not like sticking out. There's probably like a half dozen scenes that I all like about equally for different reasons, rather than it being something that really sticks out as the pinnacle of the whole thing. So, all right, MVP of the movie.
This one's a little bit tougher.
There's like three choices that are kind of obvious.
Yeah, it's a three-way thing, but I honestly think that the first out of those three that I would say no is actually Jean-Claude.
Sure.
I think that, you know, he does the fish out of water thing for the whole movie, and he does have a few moments, but for the most part, he is playing the movie very stoically the entire time. There's not a lot to really get from that. Even when he's having a theoretically emotional moment, it's just like a deadpan face. He's not doing a lot with it. So that really comes down to the lead female and then the antagonist. And I think I'm going to give it to Lundgren. I think that he just, that cheese and ham he throws on at the end of this of just chewing the scenery, going crazy with it. I think that the Ronnie actress has a more consistent throughout the entire movie, good character, good, like, you know, it really holds the stuff together. But I just got so much more enjoyment out of the late stage Lundgren. I think that really was the big ball of light there.
There's definitely an argument that she's the better actor.
Absolutely. I don't.
Sense.
100%. Yeah. I think she's the better actor between the two. But I think that Lundgren he knew what he was working with, and it being a B movie, him adding that cheese in really worked for what I was getting out of it.
Yeah, I'm also going with Lundgren for the same reason. Like, I think I kind of agree the ranking here is Lundgren, then her, and then Van Damme's third out of the three. I still think he adds to the movie, but he's definitely the third out of the three of them for me. So, yeah, this might be the second best Van Damme movie. The best, of course, is Time Cop, for those of you who are not aware of my feelings on that matter. Time Cop's awesome. So it was a bonus episode back in the day, but it should still be one that you do for homework someday.
I was going to say, I don't remember Time Cop being on my list, but I do see it there as a bonus, so I'll get to it.
I mean, I don't think you have to do all the bonus episodes, but there's maybe like a handful that I think are fun movies that you should do as homework at some point. Time Cop's one of them. So,
all right,
there you
fair
go.
Enough.
All right, we'll be getting to the ratings then.
Yes.
That's what's next. What are you rating Universal Soldier?
I mean, it's like I said at the beginning, it's not bad. It's nothing that I'm coming into this saying this is a masterpiece of cinema. It's nothing where I'm saying that this is even like a great sci-fi movie. I think that this is absolutely just like a B movie you have fun with. It's an okay thing to put on, but it's nothing that's going to stick with you for a long period of time. So I think overall, it's just going to be like a 6.5 for me. I can't justify giving it what I would say is good. I think that it does have enough flaws in it to lower it just beneath that, but it is close as you can get without being at the 7.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm going to go with a straight 7. I think two arguments I'd make there is one that it's kind of solid at what it's trying to be. So I think it is good at what it's going for. Whether how much weight you think that carries is another question, but I would say that. And I think also it maybe just gets a little bit bump for me, just down to nostalgia more than anything, because I grew up watching this, so I think I just have a little bit more of a warmth to it. But I wouldn't go above a 7, though. I don't think it, it's in great territory. Not that a B movie can get up to great territory, because I think some of the best ones can, but I think this is a solid, good, entertaining movie for what it is, but it's not trying to be anything remotely beyond that.
Right.
So, there you go. All right, well, David will have his homework movie in a second. I'll just remind you, though, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support the show and all the shows we do in MailFuzz Movies, such as The Collector's Cut or Streams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim. You can support all of it over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and there's a bunch of bonus content. For me and David in particular, there's 2 monthly bonus review shows. One is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, and then the other one is Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. Where we mentioned Kazam earlier. We've not done that yet, but someday that'll be where Kazam goes.
Great.
We've done Neil Breen movies, we've done Miami Connection, we'll be doing Uwe Boll movies before long. It's a whole torture chamber of just misery. And that's where that happens. That's $5 and up because, well, I need paid to suffer. Yeah, I need paid to suffer that much. But yes, go check out all that and whatnot. Or if you'd rather do it via YouTube, you can get most of the same content via YouTube membership if that's more your thing. But anyway, David, you go back and you do a movie that was on the show before you joined it. What was your homework movie this week?
So, for anybody who's been listening to the show for a while, I've been trying to go through for 80s, get all that stuff done, at least the ones that I think might have a chance at the top 25. Honestly, I'm pretty much wrapped up with it now. I didn't really have anything else I needed to get done, so this time I decided I was going to go with the Roland Emmerich film, and I decided Independence Day would have been a good one just to knock out. But then I saw Independence Day was 2.5 hours, so I decided I'm doing Truman Show instead, because that's shorter and I like it.
Why didn't you do Stargate, which is another Roland Emmerich movie?
Because, to be fair, I didn't know that one was Roland Emmerich.
Okay, fair enough.
So
I was like, that's literally what he did after this one, so it would have been more timely related. But
as soon as we were done, I was looking through Roland Emmerich's filmography. I'm like, oh crap, that one was also there. But Truman Show, I've seen dozens of times. I love that movie. It's fantastic.
Oh, it's phenomenal. I love Truman Show.
Yeah, it's so forward thinking. It's so much as capturing this public idea of, like, even though it's kind of fallen out of favor, it's still there, this reality TV, and more importantly, this like obsession with the parasocial relationship thing going on.
That's the thing. Even though the reality show of watching regular people trapped in a house or whatever it is, while that came just after it and then is kind of, I mean, it still exists, but it's not as popular as it once was.
Right.
I still think it's just as relevant and still predicted the future, because it's just kind of that's been replaced with social media and YouTube and stuff like that. Like it's honestly, like, I think the first time I saw Truman Show, I didn't like it, but that's because I was like 10 and expected a Jim Carrey comedy. But basically, in my later teens, when I watched it again, I was like, oh, this movie's actually fantastic, and I've done nothing but grow to love it more since then.
I think I had the exact same thing. What movie was it? It wasn't Eternal Sunshine. There was
Man in the Moon, maybe?
I think it might have been Man on the Moon, where everyone has that first Jim Carrey movie that's not a comedy, and you're just like, oh, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like the fact that he's a serious actor. But no, this one absolutely holds up. It's got a great amount of forward thinking to it. I think the rewatching it this time, because it has been a few years since I watched it, I remembered the part where we cut to Christoph giving the interview happening much, much earlier.
Oh, it's quite late, yeah.
It's significantly later than I remembered.
It's like late Act 2 when it actually happens in the film, yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's fantastic. It does a great job of like breaking down even just the progression of technology, showing like how they started out with this big bulky cameras and then everything gets small enough to like put into buttons. And oh my God, just in trying to watch this movie, the only place I had it for free was on Peacock, which I signed up for when we did that Continental show, and I just never canceled. I had to watch like 3 minutes of ads.
That was like a year ago.
I know. I'm the worst. I had to watch like 3 minutes of ads just to get into this movie. And then with all of like the product placement stuff in the show, I was like, oh God, I can feel it. It's everywhere. This just the advertising and product placement is just absolutely what this movie made it out to be. But yeah, no, it's a great movie. You and Tara both gave it a 9.5, and I can't disagree with that. So I'm going to meet you up there at a 9.5.
Yep. It's phenomenal. And
honestly, and without spoiling anything, just the last sequence of the movie, like I can watch that sequence on repeat. It is so masterfully well done.
Yeah, it gets better as it goes as well, which is also pretty special. Even that 9.5, I think that was me going up from what I previously thought I was giving it, because just talking about it just brought out like how special it was. So yeah, no, Truman Show. There you go. So a weird one to balance with Universal Soldier, but hey, it's done. So that is the show, everyone. This has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment, and next time I'll tell you what's coming. Yeah, well, I don't think it's going to change. Always subject to change in case something slots in last second, but next week we should be looking at The Call, which is another one of our recent movies that we're going to do. It's a Korean film from a couple of years ago, which sounds quite interesting. So
I believe that's a Netflix exclusive.
I don't know. Wrong. I have no idea.
I have just double check on that. Yeah, it's coming up with the big N on it, so I think it's a Netflix exclusive.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, that's what we're going to look at next week, and hopefully find some gold. And I'll just tell you right now, the episode after that is the Christmas Eve episode, just because it happens to Tuesday falls on a Christmas Eve, and we're giving you a special treat on that episode.
You gonna say it, or is it just gonna be the thing that hangs over my head like Damocles' sword?
It was teased earlier on. We were going to be doing Attack of the Clones. It's a Christmas present, and I can't think of a more selfless gift is to put myself through Attack of the Clones for someone else's enjoyment.
You know, when I saw that Star Wars got delayed, I was kind of going to reach out to you being like, we can push that now, right? Like, we don't have to get that done. We can do it whenever.
I mean, I think we'll probably end up pushing the modern ones back a bit, but I feel like the prequels we should sort of keep at pace and have that wrapped up sort of middle of the year kind of thing. But
oh God,
there you go. That is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week for The Call and Attack of the Clones the week after. So yeah, that is us. Thank you very much for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer add salsa.